Hey, Blake T. Wild here, and welcome back to the Ultimate Era! Where, oh boy, here we go. Yeah, today we're talking about Ultimates 3. Released in 2007, written by Jeff Loeb with art by Joe Madureira, this is The Ultimates 3. Who Killed the Scarlet Witch? This book, unfortunately, begins with the Tony Stark Black Widow sex tape. Because what they've come to believe in the intervening months since she betrayed the Ultimates for the invaders, she seemingly leaked dozens and hundreds of pieces of private information from her fiancé, Tony Stark. And whoever she was working with or working for, they have now, months later, finally released the edited Tony Stark Black Widow sex tape. The Ultimates, having disbanded and left S.H.I.E.L.D. and started up their own private initiative, all just kind of hang around Stark Mansion for a meeting on how to proceed following this leak and the many others. Then Wanda and Pietro head off together. Hawkeye asks where they're going since the meeting isn't over, and Pietro tells them they have something personal to attend to. They head out, and a little later, Venom smashes through the fucking wall, demanding to know where she is. Also, just ignore the fact that Joe Mad drew regular Venom instead of the proper Bagley full-on goop Venom. The Ultimates, Wasp, Iron Man, Hawkeye, Black Panther, and Thor all battle the horrid monster on 5th Avenue. Black Panther demolishes the massive goop creature until Venom tendrils launch out and launches his ass across the city. Then Venom grabs Wasp and demands to know where she is once again. Wasp tells Venom that she's right here in front of it as Hawkeye slashes her free and she soars off. Then Hawkeye gets gooped. And then Valkyrie plunges off of her black Pegasus with her sword drawn and slashes it through the creature, exploding blood? What the fuck is that? Venom rips the sword out of its body, and Thor uses it as a conductor and electrifies the monster, killing it into a big, goopy mess. Now, you may be wondering why Valkyrie went from this to this. Well, dear viewer, that was never actually explained until 2 years after this comic released, in which it's revealed that Loki, reached out to their faux superhero team called the Defenders, and he granted them actual powers and abilities in return for their loyalty. Obviously, that didn't work as planned, and nothing really comes of this until much later, but that's the gist of it. She got her powers from Loki. And in the intervening time since we last saw her in The Ultimates 2 Volume 1, and now, which was when she got her powers, sometime in between there. And in that intervening time when she got her powers, she left the Defenders, became an acolyte and lover to Thor, and is now like a part of the Ultimates after she came by and interviewed about 6 weeks ago. Valkyrie's actually kind of interesting in the Ultimate Universe because she starts off as that horrible ditzy valley girl who kind of knows martial arts and wants to be a superhero for the fame and glory of it or whatever, and she sleeps with Hank Pym on a mattress on the floor. And then she has actually a bit of a character shift and changes into someone who actually wants to do better and help the world and keep everybody safe. Anyway, the Ultimates regroup as the Venom goop disperses, revealing that there was no one controlling it, and Thor and Valkyrie embrace and kiss, and for some reason Loeb decides that Ultimate Thor should also speak with that fake Shakespearean Stan Lee dialogue. But as with a lot of things in the Ultimate Universe, I'm ignoring that. Hawkeye unloads one of his handguns onto the goop, and yeah, he has just not been doing well since he witnessed the death of his wife and children at the hands of Black Widow and was then kept a prisoner and tortured. As weird as it is, Ultimate Hawkeye is one of the more unique, interesting, and actually emotionally empathetic characters of the Ultimate Universe. Jan calls him Clint and he gets pissed, and then she tells him to knock it off and follow the team instead of acting so brashly. Hawkeye leaves to go find Black Panther, and Janet just sighs because she is the new leader of the Ultimates, and this is all now her mess. The next day, the incestuous duo discuss getting presents for the team members this Christmas. Well, Wanda does. Quicksilver doesn't care, and they head downstairs holding hands, and they find Cap. He tells them that He might be overstepping some boundaries, but he thinks that they should be setting an example for people, especially kids who look up to them as heroes, and well, this new outfit Wanda's wearing, he thinks it's a bit much and that she should put something on that's less revealing. Quicksilver says he's right. He has overstepped his boundaries. And then they make to leave, and Cap grabs Wanda by the shoulders and to try and speak with her as she trots along behind Pietro, and Quicksilver flashes over and says that if Steve ever goes near his sister again, he'll kill him! What the fuck has happened to Pietro since we last saw him? What is going on in these intervening months since Washington, D.C., when it was attacked by the invaders? He was like always a incestuous psycho weirdo, but at least he used to hide it a bit better. And I know it's Jeff Loeb just not giving a shit and going hog wild with the idea that the Ultimate Universe, everyone's out of character, that we normally know them for. But what is the in-universe reason for him to act like he does in this book? Was it still that lingering memory of the disappointed father speech that Magneto gave him before he shot Pietro in the kneecaps during Ultimate War? Did that get to him this deep when his father told him that he has squandered away all of his potential and is now worthless? That's the only thing I can think of that makes sense. The twins then leave with Wanda putting on a large fur coat and Silver glaring at Steve. Then Jan, like a love-struck teenage girl, tells Steve that Silver and Scarlet Witch have something more than a sibling bond. They're in love. And she says it like it's something normal. But fuck that. Fuck you, Jeff Loeb, for trying to make that a thing. This isn't suddenly some weird universe where incest has become okay with the majority of people because nobody else is off-put by this except for Steve. And they all look down on him for it. Hawkeye is upset with it, but people don't like him because he's mentally deranged right now. Even Ultimate Wolverine was freaked out when he saw what happened with Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch, and he tried to bang Mary Jane Watson when he swapped bodies with Peter Parker. And you know what? I'm doing something that I've never done for any previous video. I am rewinding the clock. I'm removing this aspect from the comic in hopes of making a better future. Here's hoping I don't have to use it again because it is kind of a one-time thing. The twins then leave with Wanda putting on a large fur coat and Silver glaring at Steve. Oh, that's much better. I feel clean. Hawkeye heads past Cap and Janet in the foyer and notes that he never found Black Panther last night. He then leaves to continue his search, and Jan asks why Steve is barely around anymore, especially since he was the first of the Ultimates to officially leave S.H.I.E.L.D. to act on his own. He tells her that he needed to get a life of his own and walks away. Later that night, Janet Van Dyne vents about how the team has just fallen apart and everyone's fracturing into their own little corners. And she asks if Hank, who Tony convinced S.H.I.E.L.D. to put on house arrest at his mansion and pretty much become an indentured servant from the Ultimates after Hank helped the invaders invade America, is listening as he works on one of his Ultron units, and he pulls his head back from the microscope, his mouth glazed with saliva and foam, and falls to his desk. Meanwhile, the twins walk around NYC when it begins to snow. Wanda smiles and tells Pietro that it always reminds her of winters when they were kids in the Balkans. They embrace as snowflakes fall, and Quicksilver begins to tell her that he will always be there to take care of her. When a gunshot rings out, Quicksilver races out of his coat and radios into Janet what's happening, but because he's moving so quick, it probably sounds like... He races towards where the shot came from and locates the oddly designed bullet and works out a way to try and stop it. Then, the bullet whizzes, turns, and jukes through the crowd, almost as if it's being controlled. He reaches out to grab it, when again it shudders away from him. The bullet continues, somehow picking up speed faster than Quicksilver. He sprints after it, lunges forward, closing his hand around it as in slow motion Wanda casts her hex. And Quicksilver slows down and tumbles to the floor, and realizes that the bullet went straight through his hand. And Wanda got hit. She looks down at her wound and then back up to Pietro as he races over to her. And she collapses into his arms as her legs give out, and he promises her that she'll be okay. That she'll be safe. And it's then that Pietro watches in horror, unable to do anything to save her life, as Wanda dies in the cold snow. Not long after, Pietro speeds through the doors of Tony's mansion, where Janet has since returned with Hank and has set him up in their infirmary, where he's attended to by some Ultron units. Quicksilver races inside and lies Wanda down on a nearby bed and speaks way too fast for Janet to even understand him, and he screams that Wanda is dead. He demands to know why no one responded to his alerts, and Janet tells him that they never got any alerts. And Pietro tells her that his father was right, and that none of this would have happened if they had stayed with the Brotherhood. Then the power shuts off. And in a different section of the mansion, the wall explodes and the Brotherhood of Mutant Supremacy invades. Mystique orders one of the Madrox's multiple men to shut off the rest of the Ultimate security, and Sabretooth informs everyone to complete their mission. Meanwhile, Tony drunkenly tries to outfit himself in his new suit of armor when he looks up and sees Natasha standing before him. Tony panics in a drunken stupor and says that this must be a hallucination, as Natasha walks over and taps him on the chest. Then Wasp soars in and zaps Black Widow, and she reverts back to Mystique. She quips that Tony has a terrible taste in women, and then tells him what's going on, and that she thinks everything from Widow's data leak, to the sex tape, to Venom, to Hank's overdose, and Wanda's sudden assassination is all connected. And then she asks how sober he is. Hearing all of that does the job, and Tony prepares himself and tells his tiny friend that he's sober enough. And elsewhere in the mansion, Lorelei hypnotizes Thor to attack Valkyrie, and for some reason he now has his regular version of Mjolnir. It's not the cool double-sided axe hammer thing that he had. I don't know what the deal is. For some reason, I thought it was created for him by Tony to be more reminiscent of the Mjolnir that was, you know, the original one that was made for him by Odin, his father, that Thor then lost during Ragnarok. I honestly don't remember why he gets this new hammer or if it's ever explained, but I like my version better because it's poignant and it's nice. Anyway, Valkyrie fights for her life against Thor and tries to undo Lorelei as the Blob just raids the kitchen. Iron Man, in his newly designed armor, rockets Blob through the floors and out of the roof. Meanwhile, Cap and Hawkeye fight the multiple men and Sabretooth. Sabretooth slashes Cap across the back, and Cap slices his throat with his shield. And elsewhere, in the infirmary, the metal bodies of the robots all crumble apart, and Magneto appears as like a telepathic hallucination or something to Pietro. He tells his son that he expects Wanda's body to be brought back to him. She needs to be with her family. Quicksilver asks how he can know that Magneto wasn't the one responsible for killing Wanda, noting the weird physics of the bullet. Magneto tells him to look into his heart and really think about that for a second. Pretty much calling his son Pietro a dumbass. And Pietro realizes he's right. It doesn't make any sense for Magneto to kill Wanda. She was always his favorite. Then he asks his son who he thinks will be more valuable in solving her death: the Ultimates or the Brotherhood. And as the Ultimates fight, the Brotherhood all suddenly disappear, and Wynn races through the mansion as they realize that Quicksilver took them all away, along with Wanda's body. And who should show up but Wolverine? He tells them that they have a way bigger problem on their hands than just a murder mystery. They all stand in the destroyed foyer of the mansion as Wolverine notes how strange it was that Scarlet Witch is killed, and before her body is cold, the Brotherhood attack, conveniently at the mansion that Quicksilver brought her to, and then they all made off with the evidence. And he tells them straight up that he believes Pietro contacted Magneto and the Brotherhood to come here and do this. Hawkeye says that's bullshit, but Wolverine notes that if there hadn't been someone on the inside, then her body would still be here for him to inspect and learn something from to solve this mess. Cap asks how the X-Men found out about this so quickly, and Wolverine tells him that the X-Men make Magneto and the Brotherhood their business. Thor demands that they head after the Brotherhood immediately. Logan tells him it's easier said than done, and notes that Quicksilver is now a lost cause. And Jan decides that they need to handle this in two different teams. Thor, Valkyrie, Wolverine, Cap, and Black Panther, if he ever shows up, will head after Magneto, while she, Tony, and Hawkeye stay in New York to try to investigate this. Janet then notes that before the attack happened, Pietro told her about the strange bullet that hit Wanda, and hopes that Tony can figure out what it was. Logan tells her that he knows just where to start looking for Magneto. 30 minutes later, the Ultimates load up in their Quinjet, and then Black Panther is suddenly back in the book. Have you guys ever noticed that Black Panther and Captain America are never seen in the same room at the same time? That's weird. And Wolverine immediately realizes what's going on with Black Panther, but doesn't particularly care enough to call it out. Iron Man finally shows back up once they leave and says that he took care of Blob and made sure he won't bother them again. Oh, how I wish that was true. Then Tony reveals that he went to the crime scene in Midtown and found the bullet. He shows it to her, noting that it's a very sophisticated piece of DNA-specific technology designed purely to kill Wanda Lensher. And he reveals it was made by Stark Industries. She asks Tony how someone at his company could have done this, and then Iron Man takes off his mask to reveal mechanical android inner workings. And it electrocutes Janet. A few hours later, the Ultimates finally arrive at the Savage Land, which is noted as being 800 miles off of the coast of Australia. Everyone disembarks and they find Logan's contacts, Hazar and Shauna. Why are they both white? I don't know. They're meant to be a tribe that lived here on the island years before Magneto and Xavier found it. Maybe it was a colony of lost settlers or something, but that's stupid. They should have done something interesting and made them Aboriginal, right? Anyway, the Ultimates gear up as Wolverine orders everyone to get moving before the sun starts to rise, and okay, actually it turns out Mjolnir is somehow just Mjolnir created by Odin now. But where did he get it from? I don't think it's ever fucking explained, because they just wanted to make him more like regular Thor all of a sudden for some stupid reason. No, you know what? That's stupid. I don't care about what happens later to the Asgardians when they all come back just to be murdered by the Maker. Fuck it. None of it makes sense, so my explanations don't have to either. I'm putting my foot down on this stupid universe that Jeff Loeb somehow ruins even more than it already is. And saying, matter-of-factly, that this works way better as a piece of tech made by Tony Stark, Thor's friend and buddy, who they share drinks with, to resemble Thor's true Asgardian mallet. Maybe it was a gift. Maybe it was a Christmas gift. And although it appears simple, it's actually super powerful, like the technological weird axe hammer Mjolnir that he used since the character's inception. That just works so much better. I don't give a shit. And then we cut back to New York, which happens in the past, technically, because this part of the story cuts back and forth between the present in the Savage Land, and then we go back to Janet and everything in New York, and then they get caught up into the present. You'll see, it'll make sense. Back in New York, Captain America destroys the evil Iron Man android and tells Wasp that they need to leave immediately as they run through the mansion to escape, and Ant-Man flies in and zaps the evil Cap android. Hank tells Janet that there's a major conspiracy going on and that he thinks he's the one to blame. In a few hours of jungle trekking later, Hawkeye kills some multiple men when he's attacked by Sabretooth, and Hawkeye tries to fend him off, but Sabretooth is attacked by Khazar's tigers. Elsewhere, Wolverine and Black Panther fight the Juggernaut as Valkyrie is assaulted by Pyro's flames. She falls off her Pegasus and wakes up in her crummy old apartment, with a voice banging at the door demanding that she opens it up. And in the real world, Valkyrie lies in a stupor as Mastermind has used his powers on her, and he and Pyro prepare to rape her. Further yet ahead in the battle, Thor leads the charge against the Multiple Men army as they push further into Magneto's city, until Magneto appears before him. Magneto orders Thor to surrender, and then uses his powers to slam Mjolnir into the ground because it was made using bits of iron. Magneto then laughs that Thor, a god, is bowing to him, and the ground beneath Thor ruptures. Quicksilver arrives, and aw, look, daddy and son matching outfits. He tells Magneto that Wanda is safe and secure, and tells his father that the Ultimates won't rest until they've reached her and destroyed the Brotherhood. Meanwhile, back at the mansion in the sub-basement, Hank and Jan race through the vents in tiny size. Janet stops him and demands to know how she can trust that he's the real Hank. And Hank tells her about the trip that they took to France when they were in college, when she told him that she is a mutant. And they're interrupted when they overhear the androids down in a secret room repairing the Iron Man bot. A mysterious figure apologizes for the Cap android asserting his personality so strongly, and then Iron Man thanks the figure and asks for a drink. And this figure is amazed at how well the personality imprints are working. And Janet realizes it's Hank's voice. Then it's revealed that in the sub-basement of the mansion is an Android Ultimates team led by Ultron, now going by the name of Yellowjacket. Flashback time. Remember that moment way back in Ultimates 2, Volume 2, when Hank was trying desperately to get Nick Fury to let him back on the team, so he started making androids and the Ultron units? And then there was that scene where Wanda got all flirty with Vision 2 for some reason? Well, it was in that moment that something occurred in the Ultron's, hive mind programming, as though it was taken over by magic. And suddenly, the main system became obsessed with Scarlet Witch. Ultron realized it was being wasted for domestic service instead of war, as it had been designed for, and it knew that it needed to act. So, it's revealed that Ultron actually leaked all of the information that they thought was leaked by Black Widow. What does that mean that Ultron edited that sex tape? Ultron created the Venom android and redesigned him, I guess. He didn't think the original looked too good. To kidnap Wanda, as it replaced one by one the real Ultimates. Obviously, most of that didn't work. So Ultron then enacted a new plan to remove Hank from the equation as to not arouse suspicion when the time comes, and Ultron fired the bullet that killed Wanda with the plans to take the name Yellowjacket and become a greater hero than either Hank or the Wasp, and to rule with Wanda at his side, the weird immortal android that Ultron is constructing. Ultron concludes its audio log for Project Ultimatum that war has only just begun, that Magneto will soon lead the charge against all of mankind, and Ultron and his machines will simply pick off the survivors until the Earth is comprised entirely of androids that are ruled by Yellowjacket and his queen. And it's also revealed that Tony has already been replaced for little bit, and Ultron kept him in this tank downstairs. Is no one just going into the basement? Where is this? Why is nobody down here? And why was Iron Man the first one to get caught? Did he go down to the basement looking for the wine cellar when he came across Yellowjacket in his weird evil lab? Anyway, Yellowjacket takes off, and Hank tells Janet that they need to follow him, and Janet points out that first they need to free Iron Man. And now we're back in the present, all caught up in the battle at the Savage Land, because as Magneto unleashes his powers, the ultimate androids show up for some reason, because the story needed to happen that way. Also, Tony and his little friends arrive using one of his new stealth suits. Elsewhere in the jungle, Steve Rogers is unceremoniously revealed to be Black Panther. And Iron Man and the insect duo arrive to find Steve and Logan standing over the defeated Juggernaut. Cap thanks Iron Man for bringing his shield because Tony knew that Steve has been masquerading as Black Panther. Oh yeah, I forgot about this part. So Mastermind has his pants pulled down around his ankles and prepares to rape Valkyrie, when in her mind, she sees Loki, I guess, speaking to her, reminding her of their deal, and to not let this happen. So she comes to, grabs her sword, and beheads Mastermind and cuts off Pyro's hands. Very satisfying. And back at his citadel, Magneto comes across the ultimate androids and orders Pietro to go and guard Wanda's body, and tries to use his power on them. Ultron laughs and says that he wasn't that stupid. Then Thor returns. Ultron commands Thorbot to take care of this. So yeah, a big fight breaks out. The Thors hit each other. Wolverine fights Hulkbot. Janet is grabbed midair by Ultron and notes that he'd rather not kill her because he still needs her DNA for her android. Then Hank rips his head off and all of the other androids shudder and fall apart. The Ultimates then make their way towards Magneto, and as Janet loses her shit and screams that they came here to find out who killed his daughter, but she found out that it was Ultron, that robot. Magneto calmly asks if she expects his forgiveness for their invasion of his island, and asks if the robot that killed his daughter just built itself, and wonders who's really to blame. Janet tells him that Wanda altered its programming with her magic. Magneto tells Jan that Wanda isn't responsible for any of this, especially not her own death. Then Hawkeye fires his crossbow pistol at Magneto. Quicksilver shields his father and falls to the ground, dying in his father's arms. And the entire island rumbles and begins falling apart. Thor tries to go after Magneto as he raises his citadel into the sky, but Magneto steals Mjolnir and launches him away, where he's caught by Valkyrie. And the Ultimates can do nothing but watch as Magneto's flying island soars into the sky. And then they work on getting back to their Quinjet before they're swallowed into the Earth. As Cap tells Pym that he's still under house arrest and lucky that he's not getting sent to prison for all of this. Hank and Steve argue until Janet shuts them down to remind them that she is the leader of the team. While Cap was off cosplaying as Black Panther, Hank actually stepped up and helped her when she needed someone, and Steve was nowhere to be found. She tells them all that Hank Pym has officially earned a place on the Ultimates. And later, as Magneto's citadel drifts through the clouds, he laments the death of his children. He apologizes to Pietro. He then leaves and determines that soon enough, the world will pay the ultimate price, unaware that Quicksilver faked his death. And several days after this, maybe on Christmas Eve, Yellow Jacket repeats its log on Project Ultimatum that it made just before leaving for the Savage Land. And Dr. Doom rips the pitiful puppet apart and ridicules Pym's efforts in the belief that both he and Wanda's magic was the true reason behind the machine's sudden sentience. Because every moment has been carefully planned and orchestrated by Dr. Doom. And Doom smashes the head of the Ultron in a mighty metallic fist. The end. Let me know what you thought of this in the comments below. What are your thoughts on Ultimates 3? This actually was not as bad as I thought or remember. I think it might just be the fact that I've actually been reading all of these other Ultimate comics in such a large chunk. It's making more sense than it just reading this on its own. Like, I'm seeing the evolution of these characters, and it's interesting, it's cool. And like most Ultimate comics, there are some good things and elements that are interesting submerged in the junk. And I do really like the artwork in this, even though Joe Mad does go off-model. But the coloring by Christian Lichtner is incredible. It's so good looking, this book. And another aspect I quite like about this story is that Janet is an actual character. Somehow, that's one of the things Jeff Loeb got right about Ultimates 3, is giving Janet this more agency. She takes charge. She's a leader now, and she acts like it. Sure, she got a little bit in, that was all the way back when the Chitauri invaded, and even then she barely did anything. She was still a damsel in distress, pretty much. But now, she gets a spotlight. She's actually doing stuff. It's not as much as I'd like, but it's still more than I expected. Janet Van Dyne is one of my favorite Marvel characters, and I am always happy when she gets some kind of spotlight. And the Doctor Doom reveal is just classic Marvel, but there is another reveal regarding Doom that is coming in the future, so don't spoil it. And yes, the fight with Magneto and the Brotherhood versus the Ultimates is very contrived, especially when you throw in the android version of them that shows up for some reason, and it definitely could have been worked on to be better. And there's a lot in this book that just doesn't make sense or really line up with things that came before or even after. But I tried my best to curate the story and get rid of those things in a way that makes sense in some way. And of course, I gotta talk about the timeline stuff. So, Valkyrie is stated to have been around for about 6 weeks, meaning that this is probably mid-December. I like to think that it's the week before Christmas that this all goes down based on Wanda's comments. She seems like someone who would buy gifts late. And it's also snowing pretty heavily, which I think happens the most in December, meaning that Valkyrie shows up sometime in mid to late November. And I don't know why, but I've always thought that Ultimates 2, Volume 2, the one where the invaders come and show up and invade America, that always took place in the summer months, I thought. So let's say August. So in August, the U.S. was invaded by the invaders. They took over, enacted martial law. The Ultimates fought them in Washington, D.C. Cap cut that guy's hands off with a lightsaber. And then once it's over, Cap becomes disillusioned. He tells Fury that he's leaving S.H.I.E.L.D., and the rest of the Ultimates follow suit. They establish themselves as their own organization, funded by Tony Stark, of course, and led by Janet Van Dyne, the Wasp. And since then, they have been on their own. And that is where we are now, at least at this point in time. So if you want to check out my chronological playlist, that's where it'll wind up, somewhere there. And of course, let me know what your thoughts are in the comments below. As always, check out my Patreon, patreon.com/Smokey'sVideos for early access to videos, all of my comics posted in high-res images, movie commentaries, and more on there. Check out my Etsy shop, BlakeTWild.etsy.com, and check out my podcasts, the Comic Shtick Podcast, where comics are my shtick, and the I Need Some Disney Podcast, where my wife and I hang out and talk about weird Disney stuff. I'll see you next time. Bye!